Grace and peace to all you resonating exiles out there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for tuning in online. Thank you to everybody that's here tonight. Super excited to be here. Excited for the conversation that's coming up. We had a wonderful presentation, a wonderful message on Sunday from Bro Chacho, Mr. B. Rent Grigg. Really just a great point, message, idea. It was so beautifully put together. If you haven't had a chance to see that, please make sure you go back and check that video out. Like, subscribe, share, get all those things so that you can know when we're on and know when a new video has been posted and all that good stuff. But definitely worth checking out. And I think tonight the conversation is going to revolve around some of those ideas. This idea that we are, or we have been, some of us, many of us, been exiled in a wilderness, right, by the religious community, and in a lot of ways, especially the evangelical, the American evangelical church. And that's not necessarily to throw any shade on anybody, and I think Brent did a fantastic job Sunday of pointing out things in a way that makes sense and open our eyes. But it's not a jab, it's not slander, it's not we're not trying to talk bad about people, right? No matter what denomination or even religion that you come from or what background you come from. But just the understanding that there is more to it than a lot of what we've made the point to be, right? And that we do have what was the quote, that we have an enormous capacity for
amazing capacity for missing the point.
Amazing capacity for missing the point. And so hopefully tonight we can drive the actual point home.
I hope so. I know that might seem kind of a strange way to put it as far as exile, when you're speaking about something that we talk about often is inclusion and the gospel of it, and how we're all included in what way to put it. In a conversation that I had with a wonderful brother in Atlanta today, that I brought up that phrase, the or that word epicorregio, and how it's the idea of the song leader and dance leader and a conductor making this beautiful song go through the universe, the atmosphere, everything. And I believe people are hearing it. And I think that most of us, when we look, or even some people are looking from the side of institutionalized evangelicalism, that they might look out and say, oh, the world's just getting worse, it's just getting worse, it's getting worse, and this is what was prophesied in the New Testament, days will wax, and blah, 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 all that other stuff, and itching ears and everything else. And really, people are just leaving the institution because I think they're hearing a sound.
Yeah.
I think people are hearing something that's freeing.
Yep.
I think they're hearing something that at first does exile you. At first does send you out into the wilderness. But you're in good company if you're out in the wilderness.
Yeah.
You're in great company if you're out there. And yes, out in that wilderness, you might face the same thing that Jesus faced. You'll face all of your demons. You'll face all of the worst. You'll face all of your fears and all of your beliefs and everything that you thought you knew about God and of yourself. Mm-hmm. And the question will always come back to, it seems, or at least it did for Jesus in that story, that if you are the Son of God, questioning his identity, questioning whether he was really chosen or really included in what God had been doing all along. Yep. And I think we can all agree that Jesus is one thing, at least we can agree on that Jesus is one thing that God has been up to since the beginning of time.
Yes.
Yep. I think that's a good thing to start with. If your theology includes that, I think that's an easy way to agree on, an easy thing to agree on is Jesus. Yeah. And so to at least say that, and for him to question it, and to be questioned in all of his motives, to be questioned in his identity, of whether you're the Son of God, the power, the everything. And then for him to always turn back to the logic of God. Now there's scripture that's quoted, but it's the Logos. It's the Word of God, the Logos, the logic of what God is within his being. Mm-hmm. And he was awakened to a consciousness.
Yeah.
And that even though he might be on the backside of the desert, even though you might be out in the wilderness, or you feel that you've been abandoned, you're in good company. If you're abandoned by the systems of this world, if you're abandoned by theological divisions, if you're abandoned by denomination, you're in good company. Give us a smile, throw us some joy, because you're right. We're right there with you. And I believe that if you're hearing the sound, then you've heard the same sound that we've heard. Yeah. There's a certain sound that goes out, and I can't remember exactly where it is. I know it's in one of the Corinthians, but that's where Paul asked the question, how shall the troops gather unless they hear a certain sound? Yeah. So how shall we gather unless we've heard this noise, this sound, this singing, this chorus from on high? And I forgot to read this quote on Sunday, and it's let me just read this to you. When the Jews were carried into exile in Babylon in the early years of the 6th century BCE, they knew they could never sing the Lord's song again, at least not the songs of Zion. And that's one of the psalms that they quoted from that time period. They knew that God could never be worshipped in the future the way God had been worshipped in the past. They had to learn a new song or never sing again. That, I believe, is exactly the fate of the modern Christian. I believe the new song is developing, and I want to be part of the generation that will sing it, the replacement of the theistic God of the past with the inescapable God who is the ground of being is, in my opinion, the prerequisite to sounding forth the mighty chorus of the future. That's from an Episcopal bishop written back in the 80s, believing and changing the mindset and believing that Christianity needs to reform from the inside out.
That's good.
That's something that he heard a sound back in the 80s and was preaching it until he died. That there's something about this God that is more than what an institution has put out there. That there's more to God than just that. You know, these theologies, this Calvinism, which is funny that when Calvinism, it seems like when we get beyond all that and you start finding out that God is the ground of being, you're awakened to a new consciousness. Yep. And that to me is one way that Jesus Christ comes back. The return of the Lord is this return to this consciousness. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. When you hit on this Sunday, the Hebrews 13, oh man, that was good. The Hebrews 13, I'm going to read verse 10 from the Message here, talking about exiles. The altar from which God gives us the gift of himself, that's just good. The altar from which God gives us the gift of himself is not for exploitation by insiders who grab and loot. In the old system, the animals are killed and the bodies disposed of outside the camp. The blood is then brought inside to the altar as a sacrifice for sin. It's the same with Jesus. He was crucified outside the gates. That is where he poured out the sacrificial blood that was brought to God's altar to cleanse his people. So let's go outside, where Jesus is, where the action is. Not trying to be privileged insiders, but taking our share in the abuse of Jesus. This insider world is not our home. We have our eyes peeled for the city about to come. Let's take our place outside with Jesus, no longer pouring out the sacrificial blood of animals, but pouring out sacrificial praises from our lips to God in Jesus' name. And I'm like, if you look at who we are sitting at this table and the foundation that Bishop Kello has laid here, this church was built on exiles.
Yeah, that's right.
He was exiled. Yeah. If you don't know anything about this church was built for the exiled. And this church is a sanctuary for those of you that feel exiled, those of you that feel cut off. That's why I wound up here.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, not to make this all about just coming to our church. We're talking about this relationship with Jesus as well, because it was when I was cut off. It was when I was set outside the gate, so to speak, that I felt him closer to me than ever before. And it's that he's so near to the brokenhearted that, you know, and this is, I was thinking about so many conversations I've had in my past today. But you brought it up so perfectly Sunday, talking about the need to be right.
Mm-hmm.
So the need to be right
Right.
becomes the motivation for the group. So the whole point of building a group is to get better at doing something, right?
Right.
I mean, that's at least what we think we're trying to do. So when you get a group going and you try to get better, the motive is to be right in most settings.
Yep.
Except Christ is always talking about it's not about being right. He's always pointing to his disciples, pointing at them, saying, "Hey, this is not the point. It's not about being right."
Yeah.
And I'm thinking back in my mind about all these relationships I've had with people through over the years, and disagreements that I've had over Scripture, over debacles, whatever it may be, and the brothers and sisters that I have lost, that I have loved and wanted to maintain friendships, relationships, family with. You lose them because they have to be right. You know, and I think that's where the rubber meets the road with this message is love covers a multitude of sin.
Yeah.
And we don't talk about that enough.
Yeah.
It's 1 Peter 4:8. And above all things, have fervent charity among yourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Fervent charity. Hot love.
Hot love.
Red hot.
Above these things, have hot love amongst yourselves. Fervent love.
Is that like hotcakes?
Maybe.
I mean,
In some situations.
For charity shall cover a multitude of sins.
Yes.
But it's the multitude of sins part that we have to chalk up the exiles with, right?
Yeah.
Because we're too deliberate. We're deliberating on this multitude of sins more than we're talking about the hot love or the fervent charity.
Yep.
The fervent charity is what Jesus is saying. Hey, this is the whole point. That's what you talk about, missing the point, right?
Yeah.
So the fervent charity is the point. And if we have fervent charity, and that's our drive, and that's our motive, that no matter what happens, love is going to win in this situation.
Yeah.
I had it, and he'll probably never hear this, so I'll just go ahead and say it.
Oh,
This
he's
was
gonna hear it.
This was probably 15, 20, almost 20 years ago. I was going to
How old are you?
I was going to a church. I'm getting
no
old.
one knows.
I'm getting
no
old.
one.
It's a mystery.
He shaved his beards. Now
Listen,
it looks
just listen. Focus,
like
guys.
younger.
Look
Sorry.
at. Stop looking at his
Okay.
chin.
Focus.
Stop
So I'm
looking
having
at
this
his chin.
conversation with this guy, and I'm talking to him on the phone, and this is literally the conversation, all right? Talking about exiles. The church I was going to, we had ushers, right? Deacons, ushers. I can't remember if it was over being an usher or a deacon. Pretty sure it was over being a deacon. Yeah, it was being a deacon. So we had this guy that was wanting to be a deacon, all right? He was married, divorced, saved, then got married again. Okay? Salvation came in the second marriage, right?
Yep.
So I remember the conversation with the brother of mine that I love dearly, and this was his words to me. Listen, I love you. I love you so much, but this just ain't right.
Wow. Jeez.
This ain't right. And that was the discussion. This guy can't be a deacon based on some kind of interpretation of the Scripture, and it supersedes his salvation, for God's sakes.
Somehow.
And he didn't get to, that's terrible.
Yeah.
So we made him an exile and made me an exile, but I'm thankful because without that being exiled in that way, I wouldn't be sitting here amongst you guys.
Right.
And I think that's the beautiful story of this exiled life is we are connecting with people that you're saying are hearing this sound. What is the sound? It's fervent charity.
Yep.
And it covers a multitude of sins. Go ahead. Go.
My dad had similar situation when he was a pastor years ago when I was a kid, and they had these guys that they set up, you're going to be deacons in the church, and they're like, all right, this one is agreed on, this one's agreed on. What about this other guy, which is the one my dad really wanted to be a deacon because he's a younger guy, full of energy, he's ready to serve the Lord and ready to serve the people and all that. Same thing. Somebody comes up and says, well, we'd like to see his tithe record. And he just says, I'll go ahead and tell you. The guy in front of the church embarrassed to death.
Oh, my God.
They embarrassed him to death and said, I'll go ahead and tell you, I haven't paid my tithes regularly. Nobody stopped to ask. This is what my dad was trying to point out to him. Say, did you stop to ask why he can't pay? He can't. or didn't. All you focused on was that he didn't.
Gosh.
Nobody stopped to ask the guy, are you going through something right now?
Wow.
You've got something going on financially. You lost your job or whatever the situation was. No, it's you can't be a deacon because you haven't kept the rules of this church.
Wow.
You haven't kept the rules at this place.
Lord have
And that's horrible.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of, that's 2 stories out of 2 million that are out there of people that have been harmed in so much worse ways by the church.
And 2 million's probably a generous estimate.
Yeah.
There's over 400,000 churches in America.
Yeah.
So there's more chances.
It's exponential.
Yeah.
It becomes you can't number it. And that becomes the situation that we find ourselves in. But I think too, you brought out on Sunday this beautiful juxtaposition when we talk about the concept of exile. Because we have, on the one hand, when you're exiled for truth, when you're exiled for belief, when you're exiled for seeking the deeper parts of the mystery, the hinder parts of the Lord, the hinder parts of the sacred. You're searching after and seeking after a truth that's wide open for everyone that's there, but you're finding that others are not willing to tolerate it. And so, of your overlords, the part of the story that most churches don't get into is Zedekiah was a regent of Babylon already at the time. So he was already a puppet king of his own kingdom, under control, under oppression. So his exile would have been that oppression, waiting for his relief, waiting for his deliverance, the way to be made for deliverance to come, the same way we talked about Judas making the way for deliverance through Jesus to come.
And also the deliverance of his children.
Right.
Think
So
for the future.
we see him deny the wisdom of Jeremiah, the word of the Lord. He refuses submission, gets in league with the Egyptians and the Pharaoh. I think it's Hophra at the time. And because of this allegiance, well, now Nebuchadnezzar has, I have all the ammunition I need. Now I can go in and I can lay waste to this place. I don't have to let these people have their way of life. I don't have to let them live under my control and under my dominion the way they want to. Now they're going to be slaves. They could have been servants to their overlord, to the regent, to the area, in patient submission, as they were told to do, but Zedekiah pushes against that. He goes in league with the Egyptians. He's laid siege to, and then as he's trying to escape, he's captured by the king. His sons are put to death in front of his eyes. He's made to watch his sons murdered, his lineage wiped out, the future taken from him. Now all you have is now. There is no tomorrow for you in your line. It's over for you. And then he's taken into captivity and he dies a slave. His exile was one of choice. A blind slave. So what I mean to point out by that is there is the exile in choosing the right things, the true things, the things of God. And then there's the exile you force upon yourself if you choose to go against those things. Which exile do you wind up in? Now, the beautiful part of your message, I believe, the strength, the power that really lies within the competence of the understanding that you articulated Sunday is that we are called into exile, and that is without categorization. That is without separation. That is without division. So whether you forcefully put yourself in exile or you were sent into exile because of your belief, because of the truth that you found, because of the God that you were seeking out, we are called to reunite with all of you. And there is salvation for all of you in the universal context of things.
No categorization.
There's no categorization to being called into exile.
That's great.
No matter who I encounter, whether you put yourself there or whether someone puts you there, I'm there to talk to you when I encounter you. I'm there to help you remember the God that you are when I encounter you. And that's how we enter into the dream of exile. And we enter into dreaming in exile. We enter into imagination. We enter into the childlike space. And that's what empowers the two spies, Joshua and Caleb, to say, we can go into the promised land. We can overcome. We can win. And eventually those two are given the opportunity to do so. And we see in the story, they do it.
Yeah.
The giants don't matter. The armaments don't matter. The walls of the castles of the outer boundaries don't matter, because they heard a sound. And I believe the sound that they heard when they entered into the promised land was echoed that day at the walls of Jericho as they marched round about for 7 days, and then 7 times on the 7th day. And even the walls that were constructed by these beings of men, these giants, these otherworldly things, laid waste to, because the promise was given to them. In their exile, they kept dreaming, and they wound up separating themselves from everybody else unwilling to go.
Right.
So they were living in exile in the wilderness with everyone else.
Wow.
Their deliverance into exile also delivered everyone with them. It wasn't just them. And like Dr. Peterson says, it's not just you're doing this for. It's every single person, every single being that you sent.
Here we are.
Someone's heard the sound. Someone's listening for the call.
Yes.
Someone hears that magical whisper, that mysterious sound, and is called to it. And that beckoning brings us face to face. Prosopon. Face to face with the truth and the reality of who we really are.
Right.
Because to see God is to see me. To see me is to see God.
Yeah.
And when I reach that individual, when I hear that sound and I begin to get closer, and our sounds and frequencies and vibrations begin to harmonize, the God you see in me will reveal to you the God that's in you.
Right.
And seeing you is now seeing God, and seeing me is seeing God. And we're all seeing God. Like C.S. Lewis taught in his writings, in his belief. And all of this is connected because it's all real. And there's beauty in it, even in the darkness, even in the forced exile, even in the disobedience, even in Jonah, choosing the darker path, choosing hell, finding himself there in exile, not just from others, not just from where he should be, but from the material world. And he cries out, and it's that sound. That God's waiting to hear it. And the impossible happens. He's brought back into the material world, resurrected, spit up on a beach, and knocks the dust off and goes and does the will of God. And that's what we're offering. That's what he served up on a silver platter on Sunday if you were willing to hear it. And there's a certain openness that you have to be willing to engage with the unknown, with the uncharted territories, the unfamiliar stories, the unfamiliar histories, the unfamiliar religions, and the unfamiliar cultures. That openness is the openness that Nietzsche is talking about when he refers to all the truth that's in front of you.
Right. See, and that's what you picked up on from Sunday too, is the fact that they had to learn an entirely new way to worship God.
Right.
So it's what truth is laying in front of them right now.
Yes.
And for them, it became, instead of being people of the temple, it became people of the breath, people of an entirely new name of God. And they had a new name for God. They had a new way to worship God. They had a new way to interact with God. And so they had to examine what truth is before me right now. And it reformed their religion entirely. They had a completely different way that they approached God and approached each other until many of them began to leave exile 70 years later. But then when you fast forward a few thousand years to the coming of Jesus, Jesus dies, resurrects, ascends, he's gone. And then you've got this, well, what do we do now? And they had to do the exact same thing. Deal with the truth that was in front of them.
Right.
Now, many of them, and I don't think that people like to think about this, but historically, when we look at how the church was formed, that they didn't just immediately say, all right, well, we're all Christians.
Right.
Let's go form a new religion. They still, because they were Jews,
Practice Judaism.
Monday through Saturday, they're practicing Judaism with all the high holidays, with all the everything that they did, every ceremony, every festival, and every Sabbath, which was Saturday. They would go to the synagogue. They would do the normal thing that they would do every Sunday. They would gather before the sun came up, before they had to go to work, and they would have a love feast.
Yep.
That's where agape comes from.
Whoa.
They'd have a feast of charity,
Whoa.
and they would start talking to each other, and they would have conversations. And in these conversations, they would talk about Jesus, and it's where the stories, the parables, all of these ideas that began to form what we have as the Gospels from 4 different writers.
Right.
They begin to read the letters of Paul, and they're understanding. Well, we need an anthology of the story of Jesus, and that's what they come up with. They come up with 4 anthology. They come up with an anthology in 4 different ways of the story of Jesus, and they incorporated that into their synagogue worship, because it's even recorded in the book of Acts where Paul is in the synagogue, and it gets to the point, which if he was in the synagogue, it would have been during one of the Jewish festivals or one of the Jewish religious ceremonies. So he's there in the synagogue, and it gets to the point after they've had the reading of the law, which would take about 45 minutes to an hour to read through all of the, you'd start at the beginning of the law and read to Deuteronomy over the course of a year in Jewish normal worship. And then it gets to this point where, does anybody have anything that they would like to discuss? Mm-hmm. Well, Paul stands up and he starts talking about Jesus. Yeah. And so, that was incorporated into the religion that they were already a part of. And so that, to me, I think is one of the ways of openness that Juice is talking about, is that when you approach this, you have to deal with what's right in front of you.
Right.
And when we approach people that are out in the world that are abandoned, ridiculed, exiled, excommunicated, we have to deal with the truth that's in front of us. We have to deal with the truth that, and as they do, tolerate the truth of who they are, tolerate the truth of what has shaped them, what has formed them, whether it's a bad religious experience or a bad breakup or a bad marriage or a bad, you name it, it doesn't matter. Something has formed that person over the course of their life.
But that's where you lose the church, though.
Absolutely.
Because they can't tolerate the truth.
Yep. Right. You have to do what we do.
And of course, I'm not speaking about the whole thing. I'm talking about this Pharisee mind. The Pharisaical mind that says we have to deal with the sin. We have to talk about the sin. We have to talk about the tithe record. We have to talk about how many times you've been married. We have to talk about all this because it's the sin that matters, right? Yeah. Wrong. It's the hot love. Yeah. It's the charity.
Yeah. The problem is
it's a rubber stamp.
The problem is they can't separate the sin from the sinner. Mm. They can't separate the person from the event. They can't separate the person from whatever circumstance that they're in or whatever thing that they've done that person feels like is wrong. Yep. They can't separate them from that. It's a bad narrative.
Right.
It's a bad understanding of narrative. And so what we do in the church a lot of times is, well, this person's a sinner.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, that's not who they are.
Yeah.
Those are some of those things that they've done that have caused them to miss the mark, right? Just like you missed the mark too. By the way, when you do that, you're missing the mark. Yeah. So you might as well go ahead and point back to yourself and say, I'm a sinner.
Well, they usually do. They usually say, I'm just a sinner saved by grace.
Yeah. But again, it's not understanding that the person is not the problem, right?
Stop.
And it's being able to separate those two things out and then deal with in externalization, right? Use an externalization to separate the person from the problem and like, okay, well, how do we deal with this? How do we deal with this problem right here that you have? And then save you in the process. Not throw you out, not get rid of you, not kick you out the doors because you smell like cigarette smoke or you came in hungover or, you're sleeping around on your spouse or whatever. How do we deal with the problem? Because you're not the problem, that's the problem. Right. And that's where I think specifically in psychology, the church is, falling behind, right? In the psychological, like we don't understand those things. By the way, all that stuff that I just talked about came from a psychologist, so go figure, right? And it's a postmodern idea. And there's some things about that type of therapy that I don't love, but at the same time, it is very useful. There's a lot of utility in it, right? So it's not universally applicable, but it does have some utility.
Like in identifying what the problem?
It's called narrative therapy.
Narrative therapy. Okay.
Yeah, and basically you approach the person or the family and you look at their story, right? And how are they perceiving their story, and then how do they perceive others within the story, right? And then how do we rewrite this story? Not to change history per se, but to understand it better or understand it in a different way, right? To have a different perspective on things. And then, too, you don't view the person as the problem, but you externalize. So we separate the person from the problem so that we can deal with the problem. And then the family can move on, the person can move on, the couple can move on, whatever it is, with their life. They can move forward with things, right? And it doesn't mean that doesn't come back up, because it will come back up. And the expectation is, at least for the therapist, that it will come back up and we will have to deal with this again, or you will have to deal with this again, right? But that's sort of built into it as well, that no, you're going to have setbacks, and we're going to talk about this over and over, or you're going to deal with it over and over until it's gone, right? Whatever the thing is. But again, it's about changing the story, right? Again, not changing history, but changing the perspective, right? Helping someone see things in a different light, see things in a different way. And so what you guys are talking about as far as having that openness, right? Being willing to take the blinders off, to unplug your ears, and to be present with whatever it is that is in front of you, whatever is presenting itself to you. And it is that certain sound, right? And when you there may be some fear and trepidation in going into the unknown, but when you hear the sound, you realize that you know the sound.
Right.
That, this is a familiar sound. Right. This is that sound that I was looking for, or that I knew at some point in time, right? And that's, we've been dancing around it, so I'm just going to go ahead and read it. That's 1 Corinthians 14. It says, "For if the trumpet give an uncertain sound, who shall prepare himself to the battle? So likewise ye, except ye utter by the tongue words easy to be understood, how shall it be known what is spoken? For ye shall speak into the air." That's empty words, right? Just worthless words. Now, he's talking about speaking in tongues, but this all applies. There are, it may be, so many kinds of voices in the world, and none of them is without signification. Therefore, if I know not the meaning of the voice, I shall be unto him that speaketh a barbarian, a foreigner, somebody who doesn't understand. And he that speaketh shall be a barbarian unto me. Even so, ye, for as much as ye are zealous of spiritual gifts, seek that ye may excel to the edifying of the church. Wherefore, let him that speaketh in an unknown tongue pray that he may interpret. Of course, he goes on into that, but it is hearing and knowing that certain sound and using that as edification for others, right? Not so that we can know something or learn something to tear somebody apart or win an argument and be right, right? I had that conversation with my wife today, but
who won that one?
Oh God,
she did.
she wouldn't agree with that. But anyways, because
we can have her come up here and we can discuss.
You did that to you. I was giving you an out.
I'm
just saying.
It's okay.
You want to come on up and let's finish that conversation
Forgive
that y'all had. This would be fun.
Let's engage in some narrative therapy.
Yeah, exactly. We'll do a little example here. When I was a teenager, I was dating this girl, and she had a friend who was Catholic. Her family was Catholic, and she believed that it was okay to be homosexual and be saved, or whatever, however you want to, parse it out, right? And I just had to be right. I didn't believe that. I didn't agree with that. And I think I've told this story before, but now, looking back, and what changed it for me was reading a book by Brennan Manning, and it just, completely. I remember crying so hard there was tears on the page, right? Because part of me was really, really heartbroken or upset at younger me, right? Because it was like, dude, you were so blind and stupid and ignorant to sit there and cut people off because you thought their lifestyle was not worthy of God's love or whatever it was that I that I thought. Of course, I'm going based on something that somebody's told me, not necessarily
it's a group.
My own experience. It is the group mentality, right? That I was in the crowd with the torch and pitchfork and trying to run these people off. All the while,
another thing when the pitchfork is pointed at you.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And so all the while, which I had that same experience, but but all the while,
how the tables have turned.
I cut off this girl and her friend, right? I mean, just if there was any possibility of her friend ever coming around and, whatever, having a better experience with church people, I completely demolished that.
One of the videos that you had sent, or one of the speeches from Alan Watt, he said in there about sin and compared it to the phrase, not just missing the mark, but missing the point.
Yes.
Missing the point entirely. And that's it.
Yeah.
Miss the point when you've got your pitchfork and your whatever pointed at somebody else over whatever it is, based on your own narrative, based on your own past or whatever it is that you think that you are.
Yep.
And that's probably one of the things that I guess I get from that about the narrative therapy is that it seems like it would remove it from the person so that they could say that they could look at it externally and say, that's not me.
Yep.
That's not who I am.
That's exactly right.
Truly me.
Yeah.
And you'd have to identify and say that, yes, I've done that.
Yep.
Yes, this has been a part of me, but I'm able to extract that. Sounds like something that I've heard before at the end of the table. That I'm able to extract either the darkness and extract some sort of order out of my chaos by externalizing it in some way so that I can recognize more of my godness.
Yeah.
I can recognize myself as holy. I can recognize myself as somebody that's not just chosen by God or saved or Christian or whatever it is, but how the turntables. Thanks, babe.
Michael Scott.
That's a great comment.
She's a disciple of the office that I've proselyted in the process of this relationship. She's watched all of them with me.
I also want to tell Big Daddy Dave, you can sing Amazing Grace that way.
Yes.
It may actually improve your performance. So give it a shot. Let us know how it goes. Hit us up in the comments. Give us an update next week. We'll see you on Sunday.
So can I tell a story?
Please do.
All right, John 9. This is a story from the Bible. This is John chapter 9 if you're following along at home. Jesus is walking down this road that I don't know the name of, but the disciples happen to say, "Hey, Jesus, do you see that dude over there? He can't see anything." They're like, he's blind. And Jesus is like, dude. "Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's blind. He's blind, right. So what do you guys want to talk about?" Well, why is he blind, Jesus? Is he blind because his mom and dad messed up, or is he blind because he messed up?
Yep.
Is he blind because he sinned, or is he blind because his mom and dad sinned? Which was probably the most idiotic question in the Bible.
Yeah.
Because if he was blind because his sin, he had to have been a grasshopper in a past life or something, and messed up. And now he's a blind human.
Yeah.
So we don't talk about how ignorant that question was, but it was an ignorant question. Who messed up, him or his parents? And Jesus is like, let me just heal the guy. So he walks up to the guy, and you talk about hearing the sound, the sound that the guy heard.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The sound that the guy heard was Jesus going.
Yeah.
Hawking up a loogie.
Because Jesus had to spit in the dirt.
Yeah.
So we talk about this redeeming sound.
Hey, it didn't say anywhere it was a loogie, though.
Hey, you had to work something up to get that much lather on some eyes. I don't know about you.
I mean, they are walking.
Jesus was very well hydrated that day.
Hey, so it might be tough.
As opposed to every other day. Today.
But we've talked about this over and over.
Today I'm the water of life.
We've talked about this story. So this guy,
He's living water.
what is this guy used to hearing?
What is this spitting on him?
He's used to hearing people spitting.
Dang.
Because he's blind, which means he's outside the camp,
that's a
which
good
means he's
point.
an exile.
Yep.
So Jesus, and I'm stealing this from Damon Thompson, by the way.
I know.
Props.
I know.
This is Damon Thompson, but it's
Good stuff.
so good.
Good stuff.
So Jesus spits on the clay, makes some clay, puts it on the guy's eyes, heals him, says, "Go wash in a pool of Siloam." Guy's healed, right? Great story. Church is happy. Everybody's angels are dancing, right? Wrong. It was on the Sabbath day. So now we have to talk about how Jesus is a sinner, and the guy's a sinner as well, because now he can see, and he can see by product of Jesus healing him on the Sabbath day.
Yeah.
This is how messed up church can get, guys.
Yeah.
And this is why we're talking about being in exile, because this guy got healed. He was healed of his blindness. Jesus healed him of his blindness, and the church threw him out. Why?
They still exiled him.
The Pharisees exiled him because Jesus healed him on the Sabbath day.
Yep.
So then they go get the kid's parents and say, hey, what can you tell us about your son? Well, what do you mean, what can we tell you about our son? Well, was he blind? Well, yeah, he was blind. Now he can see. Well, what can you tell us about the guy that healed him? And he healed him on the Sabbath day. And they're like, well, why don't you just go talk to him? Don't kick us out.
Yeah.
Don't exile us.
Yep.
And the parents were worried about being exiled. Their son can see for the first time in his life, but they're so worried about being exiled, they say, hey, go talk to him. He's a grown butt man. And they go talk to him.
Could you imagine how different it would be if they had heard that sound? If they had, if they were tuned in, like, could you imagine? Like, think about like, and just, I'm not taking away from your story. I want you to get back to it, but like, think about like where we're at now.
Right.
If one of our children were blind and Jesus or someone operating in their full divinity walks in those doors. And we've got a rule against a religious service on this day. We'll just put it in kind of modern text. Like it's on a Thursday. We don't do church on Thursday. We do church on Wednesday. It's a Monday. We don't do church on Monday. We do church on Sunday, the first day of the week. Yeah. But nonetheless, on that day, your child can see.
Yep.
Your child is healed.
Yep.
If anyone from the church I attended came to me where I'm at now in the knowledge that we're living in right now and said, you got it's completely different. Yep. Now everything in front of him he can see, he can walk to, he can get to, he can adventure to. And you know what? That's the adventure I want to go on because the future's not mine. It's his anyway. Yeah. So we're going to follow him as he follows the man that healed him.
Rather be a free man with vision than a blind slave.
Right.
It's freedom.
Lives in slavery like Zedekiah.
Right.
He's blinded. His future is cut off, and he dies as a slave.
Yes,
but here's a man that's crying out and saying, he hears the sound.
Mama.
Come here.
Yeah.
Right.
Saves him.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
There's just too much there.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's it. That's it right there is that you'll live your life in freedom and with vision.
Right.
Which is exactly what he talks about with the Egyptian myths, that you live your life with freedom and vision. And that's a vision that it's not just precluded to just you and you're for and no more. It's a vision that in the myth he gives back to his father.
Right.
So you could regain.
Vision. Exactly. It's shareable. You can share it with someone. Even if someone tries to take it from you, you can retrieve it and still share it with others. You can still share it with the others that need to lead the other parts of the world that you now, in competence, have dominion over.
Right.
That's Horus. That's what that story leads us to, is that very understanding. He's speaking with magic spells, or the logos of God, as the Hebrews would put it. The Egyptians put it that way. It was a magic spell. It came forward like fire out of his mouth. The Hebrews would say like a flaming sword coming out of his mouth. So however you want to describe it, however you want to put it, whatever religious context you need to stay in that your sandbox with, what we're telling you is, why don't you knock the walls down on that sandbox, open up your perspective, and see God everywhere, because God is literally everywhere.
Yes.
In everything, and has been for all time.
Right.
It's not a story. Right. This isn't narrative. This is fact. This is a universal truth. And if you'll tolerate it, you'll understand where he's going with the rest of his story.
So the parents couldn't tolerate the truth. They couldn't tolerate the fact that their son had been healed.
Right.
Because they have lived their entire life under the rules and regulations of a religious culture. Yeah. Right? So they're a part of the Pharisaical culture. Yeah. And we have to believe that their livelihood must have depended on their connection with the group.
Right.
Or they would have done what you said and said, of course my son can see. Jesus healed him. We're going with him. Yeah. But they didn't say that.
Listen to this. Friedrich Nietzsche said this. In individuals, insanity is rare. But in groups, parties, nations, and epics, it is the rule.
Wow. Yep. Read that again.
In individuals, insanity is rare. Now, Einstein would later define insanity as doing something over and over and over again and expecting a different result. Welcome to the church. In individuals, insanity is rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epics, it is the rule.
Whoa.
Wow.
See, and that's the other thing.
Group think you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, they had already created some sort of neo-paganism themselves.
Right.
That was already apparent in the disciples who said, well, whose fault is it? Have they displeased the gods in some way? And they didn't, of course, in the story that's in John 9, they don't use the term the gods, but that's
the question.
That's exactly what they're getting at.
Yeah, that's what you would hear in any other culture at the time.
Has Zeus been displeased in some way? Has Poseidon been pissed off and now there's a giant storm swirling over the ocean?
Yeah.
Like, no, have they displeased the gods in some way? Is that why that their son is blind, or did somehow in the womb he's displeased the gods?
Right.
Like, what is it? And that's what they've done, is they've lived off of this weird paganism to try and say that you have to earn it.
Wow.
Yeah.
You have to work for it, and if you do something,
and you never get it that way. It's literally
always out there.
The group's insanity. It's the rule they create. Is we're going to do this over and over and over for generation after generation after generation of less and less tolerance of truth, more and more exclusion of divine beings, over and over and over again, until we're seeing now the results of that. And in a country that is so dominated by the presence of churches, dwindling numbers, no one is going. Churches are closing left and right. Why? Because that is not the way to reach people. It's pushed everyone away.
Yeah.
These divisions, these rules, these means of separation have only pushed people further from the realization of their divinity and further into their identity that they base in the material world, which will pass away.
Man, to piggyback on your Nietzsche quote, here's a Rick Rubin quote. As children, few of us are taught to understand and prioritize our feelings. For the most part, the educational system doesn't ask us to access our sensitivity, but to be obedient, to do what is expected. Our natural independent spirit is tamed. Free thought is constrained. There is a set of rules and expectations put upon us that is not about exploring who we are or what we are capable of. The system is not here for our benefit. It holds us back as individuals to support its own continued existence. This is particularly undermining to independent thinking and free expression. Now, as artists, listen to this, as artists, our mission is not to fit in or conform to popular thinking. Our purpose is to value and develop our understanding of ourselves, Michael, and the world around us. To be self-aware is to have the ability to tune in to what we think, how we feel, and how much we feel it without interference. To notice how we notice the outside world. Self-awareness is a transcendence, an abandonment of ego, a letting go.
I'm not gonna one up you, but I'm gonna throw another quote on that. Just speaking to the educational system, Rockefeller was quoted, and I'll paraphrase this as saying, he did not want another generation of thinkers. He wanted generations of employees.
Yeah, because he was on the school. He was the head of the school board or something.
He's leading up the whole push for public education.
Wow.
And getting it all started. And that's the basis of our educational system, is men like that who put it together. Now, if men like that in a modern-ish era for their time, can put together an educational system to teach our children how to be employees instead of thinkers. Imagine what the religious leaders did in the beginning of the churches to call people into sheep instead of leaders, into obedient slaves instead of free thinkers.
That was Rockefeller, right?
Yeah.
Okay. In New York, at Rockefeller Center, when you walk out of one of the edges of Rockefeller Center, there is a humongous statue of Atlas holding up the world on his back. Just across the street is St. Patrick's Cathedral, surrounded by images of the apostles, all of them, and all of them have humble looks. They're all looking down. And then they're not like Atlas looking up, who's holding the world on his back and sustaining everything. That idea, to them, to that empire, to that kingdom, this is how we sustain our wealth. This is how we sustain our empire. This is how we sustain
work.
But to the other side of the street, It's humility. It looks like servitude.
Mm.
It looks like love. It looks like the doors of this to that church is the same thing that's in the book of Revelation, that the doors will never be shut. They'll always be open.
Yes.
The doors of that church are open. And when you walk in there to pray in the middle of the day on a snowy afternoon on a Saturday, there's homeless people sitting in the back pews to stay warm.
What are the doors then? Lift your heads, you ancient doors.
Right, we're the door.
We are the doors.
We're the doors.
And if the doors are always open, then what is our job to be? Always open. And not to put some kind of condition in front of whatever it takes to walk through the door. Yep. If your door's shut, then you shut the door, friend.
That's right.
If your door is shut to the person that needs you to be the one that comes alongside of them and they're being, what is the word for being exiled? I've been trying to think of it all night. Is there a word for like an exilement or something? Come on, give me a word here. It's got to. Come on, somebody. In being exiled, there needs to be a word there.
What were you going to say?
Oh, you mean like what?
In being exiled.
You're the exiled.
Yeah, but there's got to be a word for that. We'll look it up later.
The exiled ones.
So when you go to the exiled, okay, thanks. That was very profound. Thank you. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. That's exactly what I was looking for.
Can we change the title on the fly?
Great.
The exiled ones.
The exiled.
By the way, if we're the doors, I got dibs on Jim Morrison.
All right. All right. So jumping back into the story really quick. In summary, Jesus heals the blind guy. Pharisees go to his parents. They deny that he's even associated with them pretty much. We know the kid loosely know him, right? Go talk to him. So verse 24. It was his mom and dad.
Yeah. I birthed him.
That culture.
Sure.
They had to have been.
Sure.
For them to not, and that's what we face, guys. That's what the church faces. That's what we all face. You're going to have to make the decision. Is your ego and your status as important as the person that's exiled?
Wow.
Who's more important, the person that's exiled or your ego and your status and your establishment? And, right, the person that's exiled. Well, what's that going to take? It's going to take you making yourself of no reputation.
Right.
Oof.
Making yourself of no reputation and pouring on the charity. When they have a multitude of sins, and you can chalk that up and you can count them guilty all you want to. Sure, let's talk about the multitude of sins. But Jesus gives us a way to give fervent charity. So back to the conversation. We're getting there. So he says to the blind. Let's go to verse 24. Let's just read it. John 9, verse 24. Then again, they called the man. This is where the Pharisees are talking to the blind guy. They called the man that was blind and said unto him, give God the praise. We know that this man is a sinner. And they're talking about Jesus. He answered and said,
give God praise.
Whether he be a sinner or no, I know not. One thing I know, that, whereas I was blind, now I see. Then said they to him again,
he's an agnostic.
What did he do to thee? How opened he thine eyes? Verse 27, he answered them, I have told you already, and you did not hear.
Yeah.
Wherefore would ye hear it again? Will ye also be his disciples? Then they got really mad. Then they reviled him and said, Thou art his disciple, but we are Moses' disciples.
Right.
We know that God spoke unto Moses. As for this fellow, we know not from whence he is. The man answered and said unto them, Why, herein is a marvelous thing, that ye know not from whence he is, and yet he hath opened mine eyes. Here, you're supposed to be the experts, and you have no idea where he came from. And I was flipping blind a minute ago. Now I can see. You guys are stupid. All right, verse 31. Now we know that God heareth not sinners, but if any man be a worshiper of God and doeth his will, him he heareth. Since the world began, was it not heard that any man opened the eyes of one that was born blind? If this man were not of God, he could do nothing. They answered and said unto him, Thou wast altogether born in sins. We don't care that you can see now. Yeah. You were altogether born in sins, so
we're not letting go of the
how are you going to teach us? And they cast him out, exiled. Then, verse 35, this is the glory of God right here, verse 35. Jesus heard that they cast him out. So who have you heard that's been cast out?
Oh, God.
Who have you heard that's been cast out? Yeah. Who do you know that's been cast out? Yeah. Who do you know that does not go to church right now, does not have anything to do with God, doesn't even want to hear you say the word Jesus, because Jesus, in their eyes, is the one that casted them out? No, he didn't. Who do you hear? Yeah. Who do you hear? Whose voice, whose face do you see right now as that comes up in your mind? That's the person you're supposed to go to, because Jesus heard that they cast him out. And when he had found him, he said unto him, do you believe on the Son of God? And he answered and said, who is he, Lord, that I might believe on him? And Jesus said unto him, thou hast both seen him, and it is he that talketh with thee. And he said, Lord, I believe. And he worshipped him. And Jesus said, for judgment I am come into this world, that they which see not might see, and that they which see might be made blind. And some of the wrong my rights, man. God. And some of the Pharisees which were with him heard these words, and said unto him, are we blind also? And Jesus said unto them, if you were blind, you should have no sin. But now you say, we see. Therefore, your sin remains. So wrong our rights. That's the word that we're praying that as a church, as a family. Yeah. If we're so set in our right, in our need to be right, our incessant need to be right on whatever topic that you can throw up, yeah. God, wrong it for us. Yeah. Wrong it for us. Wrong our rights. Because if loving you is wrong, I don't want to be right. Come on, man.
That's the
orthodoxy and heresy flip-flop, yeah. Right? It's orthodoxy is the right belief.
Right.
Well, I need you to wrong my rights.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to go over here in the heresy sandbox for a while, and I'm going to have to play over here.
Yep. and we're not to steal from Jordan Peterson a little bit. We're not carelessly denigrating what does he call it? Societal.
Don't carelessly denigrate
structures of society or something like that.
Yes.
That's not the word.
Something along those lines. I forget which one it is, but something
societal
like
institutions.
If you're looking for a word, Josh can help.
That's it.
He's great at that.
Don't carelessly denigrate institutions of society or societal institutions, however he says it. We're not doing that. Like I think that's something that we want people to understand. We're not just poking holes in the church or religion or whatever for the sake of that. No. We're doing that so that, going back to what Josh was saying about sanity, so that you can become and remain sane, because you do need these structures around your life, but they need to be done in a proper manner so that within yourself, for one, you have to be structured, right? Because you're made up of all these different little parts of you and these little sub-personalities that are running around in your brain trying to pull you here, there, and everywhere. And so you have to actualize in that sense, but then you've got to be surrounded by other structures that help keep you sane or keep you in line or on the right path, or however you want to, say it. But your family, your spouse, your friends, right? And then on a broader scale, those religious groups that you belong to. So whatever community you belong to or spiritual house you belong to, you need those, you need that structure around your life to help keep you stable and to maintain you. And what we're saying is that the structure that Christ came to judge is not the right one, because he said, for judgment I came. Well, what does that mean? He came to just judge everything and tell us we're all doing it wrong? No. But when the ideal man walks in the room, when the ideal structure walks in the room, oh, I feel the Holy Ghost. When the ideal temple walks into the room, when the ideal God walks into the room, everything else is under scrutiny. Everything else has an eye put on it, right? And then we figure out, oh, yeah, actually, the blind people are not so blind, and the people who said they could see are totally blind. Yep. And now it's the blind leading the blind. It's the willfully blind leading the unwillfully blind. Man. Because I didn't mean to be blind. I didn't want to be blind, but somebody said, hey, you should see this, not that. And then they put a blinder on me. Yep. Right. And then I started to see things the wrong way. I started to see things upside down, right? And now I need to be seeing things right side up, which is actually upside down, which is the other blind man being healed story, where he sees men as trees. He says, they're upside down. Something ain't right, And yeah, the first try, we didn't get it right. We're seeing things upside down. But now we are understanding, and we can see things right side up. And we understand that, again, we're not carelessly,
denigrating social institutions or creative achievement.
That's it.
That's Thank you.
We're not carelessly denigrating those things. We are
Redemption.
simply saying we've been there, we've experienced it, right?
Yeah.
We've been a part of it. I've been a part of it. I've been one of those blind people, who thought I was right. I thought I was living in orthodoxy. I thought I had it all figured out. And it's like, I don't know nothing.
Yeah.
And when you go out into exile, when you enter the wilderness, there is a deconstruction of things. There's a deconstruction of your faith in a sense, right? That's kind of a hot topic, I guess, in the religious community, but not in that. I don't mean it in that sense, but
even the deconstructionist idea is doing exactly what you're saying. It just denigrates the social institution. It just I'm not saying that everybody that goes through deconstruction, because I know, like you said, it is a hot term and people use it in various ways. But for the majority of the people that I've encountered on the deconstruction path, so sometimes it's a lot of that denigrating the social structures, denigrating the institutions for the sake of their own trauma. They've been damaged.
It's their own hate.
It's like when people have a certain relationship with somebody else and that relationship is no more, typically it's like anytime they bring that person up, it's like, oh, I hate them, or
bitterness.
But it's bitterness because you've been hurt.
Yep.
So you're lashing out of a place of pain.
Yep.
So for most of the crowd, most of us that have gone through deconstruction, when you bring something up about the church, like, oh, I hate the church because this is what they did to me. This is what they did to me. And they are 100% right. The church did that to them. But the thing that gets me is exactly what you said. Who's been exiled? Mm-hmm. Who is it that's been harmed?
Yeah.
Who is it that's been told, oh, no, you're blind? Like, no, he touched me. I can see.
Yeah.
He touched me. I'm seeing things a lot more clearly now.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm using things that maybe we bring up, and at least I've done it before. Bring up the Bhagavad Gita. Maybe I use one of those. Like, oh God, now you're interfaith. Now you're saying all kinds of crazy stuff, and it's like, oh no, well hang on a minute. I still believe in Jesus. I'm still a Christian. I'm just one that believes it maybe a little bit differently than you. Maybe I've been touched by the mud, and now I can see things a lot more clearly with the mud on my eyes, as opposed to the religion that's right in front of me.
Yeah.
So who is it that have been told that you're blind, blinded, and then actually you're the one that can see?
Yep. Can you tolerate the association with said person?
Oh man, yeah.
Can you tolerate the darkness that you'll have to tolerate?
Yep.
Yeah. Can you tolerate? So whatever they're going through, whatever they're exiled for, you're going to have to tolerate that within your own ego.
But also tolerate it to a degree, but also be the person to say that I'm not ashamed to be associated with this person without being the person to say, well, don't you know that Jesus said go and sin no more?
Correct.
He said to do it this way. No. I'm not going to bring that up. I'm going to be the one that says, if you have a stone to throw, go ahead and throw it.
Yep.
Love covers.
Instead, I'm going to put my finger in the earth, and I'm going to touch the same thing that God touched. The finger of God is going to touch the ground, and something new is going to be formed.
Right.
And then this woman who's been caught in the act is going to be said, where are thine accusers?
Yep.
Neither do I condemn you.
Yep.
Right.
And just leave it at that. I don't have to be the one to say, oh, he told him not to sin anymore, not to do that. Well, is it the action, or was it the missing the point? What was he really getting at?
Stop missing the point. That's what I believe. That's what he continually reiterates over and over again in his final days, those last 8 or so days with the disciples and Judas.
Yep.
He's frustrated that time and time and time again, you guys are missing the whole point of why I'm here.
Yep.
Right.
You're so caught up in who's going to be this, who's going to be that, who gets it more right, who gets it more wrong, constant competition, constant power struggle.
Yep.
Who wants to be competent? Oh, Judas does.
Yep.
Well, I found the one. I found the one that gets it. I found the one that sees it. And just like he says in the story, Judas is identified as the one who knows where he came from. Mm-hmm. So like the man that's now can see, when he's questioned by the alleged experts, if he's done this, you're telling me you don't know where he came from? What? Like, I know I'm just getting this sight thing down. I'm looking at your face. I'm trying to understand like what people's expressions are, but it looks like you're confused.
First at this whole vision.
I've
thing,
never seen
but
stupidity before, but now I
I think
have.
I'm looking at
But
it.
what I think he's rightly identifying is their love for darkness.
Yeah.
Quote that scripture.
This is the judgment, or this is the condemnation, that light has come into the world, and men have loved darkness.
So what's the blind man see?
Darkness.
You
Because
love
their deeds are
darkness.
evil.
Yeah.
Why is the conversation with Peter on the beach about love? What do you love? What? And that's not to say that he loved darkness, but it's to say that he's attached to dark things. And that love for competition, of being the one, of being the star of the show, of being the head honcho, of having the most feathers, of wearing the most jewels in your crown, of having the most piercings or adornments, of wearing the most expensive clothes or carrying the most expensive bags. What darkness do you love more than you love God? What darkness do you love more than you love the gods that you interact with every day?
Come on.
Because if you loved them, you would feed my people. If you loved them, you would feed my sheep, which means if you heard one of them was exiled, even one out of the 99, you would go and find the one.
Yeah.
If you know that they need to be fed, you would leave and you would go and feed them. You would leave and you would go and find them. It says in the scriptures, he went and found him.
Yeah.
He sought the man out. And who knows where this man went now that he can see where he's going.
Right.
And he doesn't need somebody's help and support.
Right.
I mean, we're talking ancient times here.
Right.
That is a huge disability
Yeah.
that you were shamed for, put out for, not tolerated for. Why? Because their love for accusing you of doing something wrong to be afflicted like that. They didn't want.
For repentance is what it says about the 99.
Right. No need
Yeah.
for it. They're just
They have no
operating
need
around.
for
But why? I'm going to leave those. I'm going to go after the one.
Come on.
I'm going to see the one. I'm going to hear the one. Jesus heard about it.
Mhm.
There's so many sounds, there's so many bells that are ringing. I hope all of you hear it. Because it connects dots all over the place. But he hears
Let he that hath an ear hear.
that the man was exiled. And he seeks and finds him and lets him know who he is, where he came from. And that man rightly identifies the same way Judas did. I know where you come from.
Mm-hmm.
I know why you're here. And I know where you're going back to. I know that you're God. And I believe that's who you are. And that's the conversation we all have to have. With ourselves. With God ourselves. So we can understand what all we can really do in this life. Greater works. I know I say that over and over and over again. I'm attempting to manifest that. I want to see what these greater works really are. And maybe it is a global movement to reach all those that were ever exiled.
Yes.
Maybe that is the greatest work, is that finally the four corners of the earth are covered in the presence and identity of God.
Yeah.
That God is one as we are one people. No longer nations, no longer globalist ideas and countries and all of these separations and segregations. That's never what God intended. Look at the Tower of Babel. Congregating together in one place for one purpose to do one thing, which is the accumulation of power that was immediately put to rest. Spread out. Seek out the four corners of the world.
Right.
Fill the globe.
Right.
And remain one people with one God. Because that's what we all are when we return back to where we came from. I just think it's just.
We got to read what Mama Kello said tonight.
What she said.
She said in the comments, the heart of God loves us at all times. And if we truly have the love of God dwelling in our hearts, we will love others, no matter the situation. We will see others with the eyes of our Father, and His love covers a multitude of missing the mark.
Somebody
What a voice to hear it
sees things.
Right.
Somebody's heard the sound.
Heard the sound.
And it doesn't matter what age you are or how you came up. I mean, you're talking about a woman that came up in several different eras of church.
Yeah.
and a lot of dogmatic practices and a lot of bad habits and a lot of bad situations and bad things. But her openness, her willingness to be open for the sake of love, opens her to all truth and allows her to be tolerant of all situations, of all peoples, at all times.
And a more tolerant woman you'll probably never find.
If you see her, all she carries on her face is the joy of the Lord.
Joy and love, openness, happiness, joy.
She makes the simple calculation. She's got it more figured out than I do.
She raised you, and she's still smiling.
I know. And I suck at this.
Smile if you're exiled.
I am not her, but I'm not supposed to be. And neither are you.
Right.
You have your own gift. You have your own strength and competency to walk in, and that competency is not of yourself. It's not of the material world. It's not of what you can accumulate here. It comes only from your relationship, your unity, your oneness with the sacred. And it makes you not a temple built with men's hands, but a sanctuary and a habitation of the divine that becomes a door to everyone who's ever been put out of anybody else's space, of any other place that they've been in, of any other situation. It's an open invitation to come and see that the Lord, the sacred God, is for everyone and is good.
Matthew 22, 8 and 9, Jesus is telling a story. He says, "Then saith he to his servants," talking about the master of the wedding is ready, but they which were bidden were not worthy. Go ye therefore into the highways, and as many as ye shall find, bid to the marriage."
That's what we're doing. We're just asking you to come to us. If not, we'll come to you. Let us.
And you want us to come visit you.
Yep.
Send a private message with your address. Give us a little bit of context about your situation, or maybe not. If you just want us to come visit, send us a private message with your address. We will make sure to come visit you.
Yeah, we'll just come love you, if that's okay. Because I know that it's four guys talking about some stuff that you maybe have never heard in church before. That can be a little intimidating at times, and also can be a little bit much to affiliate yourself with. So we understand the trepidation. If you would rather not, if you'd rather remain in anonymity, completely understand that, and we respect that. So we will come to you. We'll go to your house. We'll go to wherever you want us to meet and have conversations, have whatever, just a way to love you. That's really it. And that was really the end game of that dream that I was talking about on Sunday, is that it seemed like every exile that we combed across, it just made the line get even bigger, and it created another person to search for another person. And that's what it really is with me. And I was talking to a friend today, a new friend that I just made, and saying that in my past I've always, grew up Pentecostal, grew up speaking in tongues, and I still do, and I've never felt the Holy Ghost more in what I'm doing or saying than this right here, than something that is inclusive, something that's full of the love that Jesus showed us from his Father. Nothing has made me feel the Holy Ghost more, and made me cry more, made me feel more compassionate, and made me want to silence the voices of anybody that would try to create division or any type of segregation amongst me or anybody else based on belief or religion or background or anything that is out there where people attempt to create their clay jars of the nations. And here comes the rod of iron of Revelation breaking up all the clay pots, and we all end up meshed together. We all end up in one thing that's called humanity. And humanity is divine, and it's loved by God.
And we hear another voice in the comment stream, Lauren Grigg, with a great phrase, sanctuary for the exiles.
I love you, baby. You're great.
See, and this is why it was so important to talk about the voice of our women, of our members, of each and every one of us. That's a beautiful way of saying it. And it's a beautiful message that I relate to deeply, because that's exactly what I feel like came out of this conversation tonight. What was birthed in me was the idea of being a sanctuary to the exiles. And she's already there. She's already heard that sound in where we've gone. And this is why we need all the interaction that we can get, because you guys make it so much more worth it to know that the time and the energy and the effort, even though we're having a good time and we're having fun, and it's not a labor. This isn't a work that we have to do. It's not obligatory. But the time and the effort and the research that we put into it, when we get that feedback from you, or when we hear the sound that you play is in perfect harmony with the sound that I've felt when I delivered it, then we begin to hear that orchestral sound begin to build. And it begins to crescendo, and it gets louder and louder and louder, and it draws in more and more and more. And then we're really doing something.
Critical mass.
We can reach critical mass. That's been ministered from this ministry multiple years ago. And it's as true then as it is today, if not more true today. Because our opportunities and our outreach is expanding.
Greater than ever.
We are moving forward through this universe as universes in ourselves. We are with God, and God is with us. He in us, us in Him, them in us in them. This is what we believe. This is what we believe about who we are. Yes. And so if you'll repeat after me. I love Him.
I love Him
because He first loved me. And if you're interested in visiting, it's 1510 Hargrove Avenue, Gastonia, North Carolina, 28052. Please don't forget to like, comment. Thank you for all of those that have commented in the stream tonight. And subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our live streams. Apple TV, YouTube,
Roku,
Facebook, NTCFB, Facebook, The Gathering Echo. Stay tuned. Stay engaged. Stay involved. We'll see you next time on Sunday. Thanks.